Greetings to you all and welcome to episode 12 of AfroLeap 21 podcast. In this podcast, we'll be focusing on the sustainability transformation of the 21st century. As some of you may well know, sustainability has been around for the last couple of decades, but in recent years, there are a lot of misconceptions and misperception about sustainability, and some people are portraying it as a passing fad and writing it off. But for us at AfroLeap 21, sustainability has its own drivers, has its own dynamics, which is beyond the control of anybody, and understanding the fundamental drivers behind it will help us to manage it in such a way that it will benefit the broader segment of humanity. So in this podcast, what we'll try to do is, what are the principal drivers? Why are we talking about sustainability? We believe that sustainability is the dominant transformational discourse in the 21st century for companies, for governments, for entities, in whatever activities they are engaged, they will be in the middle of this sustainability transformation. And in one of our earlier episodes, we have looked into the details of sustainability from systems thinking perspective. And this can be taken as a follow-up of that episode on sustainability as a systemic property. So we go to the details of this presentation. Start with the historical context, how we have to look at from the broader human history perspective. And as it was indicated in Meadows and his colleagues' publication way back in 1992, humanity has passed through three major stages of socio-ecological regimes. The first one is the hunter-gatherer socio-ecological region that existed for at least 100,000 years before the agricultural revolution took place some 13,000 years ago. And then the agrarian socio-ecological region that existed until the Industrial Revolution nearly 250 years ago is the socio-ecological region that is supported by various forms of societal development, including language, literature, history, and so on. So that provided sort of the basis for the industrial socio-ecological region that begins in the 1770s and which is currently dominant in the global economy. So looking back all the way to the first humans, we started as hunter-gatherer, and then we moved into the agrarian, and then we moved into the industrial economy. And interestingly, you see all these three levels of socio-ecological regions, even today in some part of the world, mostly in the global south, in developing countries where you have still hunter-gatherer societies, agrarian societies largely characterizing most of the developing countries' economy, and then an emerging industrial economy. So we have all these three stages of socio-ecological regions even today in different forms and contexts. And when we relate this socio-ecological regions evolution, ecosystem services has been the foundation both during their existence and the transformation. So it provided for the functional relationship between natural, social, and economic systems. And there are two principal categories of ecosystems function. Some literature expanded to four, but for the discussion we're having, the most critical part is this two part. The provisioning function, which is also called the source function, as determined by the regeneration and resilience capacity of the natural system. So we get all of our inputs in the form of material, energy, and other resources from the natural systems. and make them available for our consumption practices. And then we have on the other side the regulating functions, which is also called the sink function, as determined by the assimilation and systemic deposition capacity of the natural systems. When these functions work in a more healthier way, we have a more balanced kind of socio-ecological regimes. But historically, these functions and these relationships have been influenced by the different stages of socio-ecological regimes we have passed through. Start with the relationship between socio-ecological regimes and ecosystem services. The natural system has been central to sustain humanity and evolution of the different socio-ecological systems. Without the natural ecosystem, we would not have been able to go through all the different stages of socio-technological regimes. And ecological factors have been central to the rise and fall of civilization in human history, including the Babylonian and the Roman empires. The empires have been transitioning from one to the other. And this is also obvious in African empires also. And the adverse impact of human activity on the environment has been with the limit of the carrying and assimilation capacity of our planet for millennia. Most of the impacts we have from the hunter-gatherer society or from the agrarian societies were to a large extent localized. Their effect was localized and their impact was localized. It didn't reach to the level of influencing the global environmental system. So when a hunter-gatherer society reaches a limit in terms of the provisioning function, they just move around. They move from one place to another place. So migration is a way of moving away from the area which is very much constrained and impacted to green pasture, to green areas where more provisioning functions could be available. And this has been made impossible with the sedentary kind of lifestyle that came with the agrarian revolution. People stayed in one place. They started domesticating plants and animals, going into agricultural farming practices. But the more they put pressure on the natural system, because of the population growth and the requirement for higher resource consumption, they will be faced with the challenge of not being able to meet the requirement of the population, and that will lead to the change of systems, change of empires, and so on. And that is why stronger empires become weaker, and then the other groups come forward by toppling the dominant empires. And this relationship has been going on for quite some time. So for millennia, human impact on the natural system was to a large extent managed by the regeneration and assimilation capacity of the natural system. This started to be constrained at the local level during the agricultural revolution. But when we went into the industrial revolution, the whole balance started to change. And this dynamics has fundamentally changed since the Industrial Revolution, and more specifically since the beginning of the 20th century. So from local impact, our impact on the natural environment becomes more globalized. So whatever extraction we had with the Industrial Revolution, which led to basically colonialism, which was in search of resources from different parts of the world. And whatever discharge we sent out to the environment created a lot of impact that went much more beyond the local natural system assimilation and regeneration capacity. And that is what created all of the major environmental problems that we have today. So from the local to the global level, starting from, if we look at the state of the planet, the resource trend, with the current trend of extraction, material resource extraction could increase by almost 60% from 2020 levels by 2060. This means from 100 billion tons, which is already a huge amount, we will go into 160 billion tons with the current trend of production and consumption. This is an impossible scenario within the planetary capacity. Already it has started being constrained in some areas, and if we increase our resource extraction by that level, we'll not be able to sustain whatever kind of economy we would have. And interestingly, the distribution of this material consumption is very much varying from one region to another region. High-income countries use 6 times more materials per capita and are responsible for 10 times more climate impacts per capita than low-income countries. Most of this data is taken from a report produced by the International Resource Panel in 2025. And another figure we have is from Worldwide Fund in 2024. There has been a catastrophic 73% decline in the average size of monitored wildlife populations over just 50 years, from 1970 to 2020. This is shown with the report titled Living Planet Index, which shows the various impact we have on the natural environment. The same report shows that freshwater population have suffered the heaviest declines, falling by 85%. This relates to the biodiversity, the impact we have in the global biodiversity scenario. The biodiversity is the foundational platform so from which all these provisioning and regulating functions are being carried out, and all of the biodiversity population we have within the freshwater system and the terrestrial system and the marine system is being affected by 85%, 69%, and 56% respectively. These are not just numbers; they are real scenarios we have in our planetary system, and they have major impact on our possibility to sustain our well-being in the coming years. This shows the trends in global resource extraction, which has been increasing continuously since the 1970s. And this cannot continue indefinitely because the planet Earth has a very finite, limited capacity, both in terms of functioning, provisioning function, and in terms of regulatory function. So unless we manage our resource extraction in such a way that it will be within the limit of the planetary regenerative and assimilative capacity, there will be a point of crash, which will be catastrophic in terms of its impacts. This is a joint effort by a number of highly recognized research institutions and organizations which measure our planetary extraction and discharge functions in relation to the biocapacity of the planetary Earth by way of its regenerative and assimilative capacity. And this graph shows that every year we are in the declining stage. For example, by 2025, by mid-July, we have already exhausted the annual biocapacity of the planet Earth, both in terms of its provisioning and regulating function. That means we are eating into the stock of the planet, which will have its own detrimental impact at the end of the day. So these are the trends on the resource side, the carbon trend side, as it was reported by the World Meteorology Organization. The atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide in 2023 was 151% of the pre-industrial concentration in 1750. You can imagine what kind of effect we are creating. And the concentration of methane reached 1934 parts per billion, which is 265% higher than the pre-industrial level. Similarly, the nitrous oxide reached 337 parts per billion, which is 125% of pre-industrial levels. This shows the regulatory function is also being constrained. The higher we have in terms of our discharge, the ability of assimilating this in the natural system is being weakened by the day. And that is why we are seeing the result of all this effect. The annual average global mean near surface temperature in 2024 was 1.55 degrees centigrade above the 1850-1900 average, which used to represent pre-industrial conditions. So essentially, at the current pace of action, the window for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade is already gone, and the possibility for limiting it to 2 degrees centigrade or 450 parts per million is fast closing. The 450 parts per million concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is recognized as the tipping point for the planet Earth, which will result in an irreversible kind of change in our planetary atmospheric system. So we are facing both from the preventing side and from regulating side. We are facing a major threat in terms of our actions in the production and consumption domain. This is a graph that shows where we are in terms of the planetary boundaries, which is produced by a reputable institute, the Potsdam Institute, in collaboration with the Stockholm Environment Institute. And it shows that we have already overshot 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. All these headings you see around the circle are sort of the principal factors of the provisioning and the regulating functions. And we are already in the red zone in most of these planetary boundaries. So we're approaching that limit where everything will go beyond our control. This is on the ecological and the ecosystem and our production and consumption system side. But on top of that, we have this major issue of socioeconomic disparity, both within and between countries. The World Bank indicates that the number of people living under poverty line today is the same as it was in 1990. And almost 3.6 billion people, which represents 44% of humanity, are currently living under the poverty line. Shockingly, in a perverse symmetry, the richest 1% own almost an identical proportion of 45% of the global wealth, as per the estimate made by these institutions. The socioeconomic disparity between and within countries are projected to rise in the coming decades due to the impact of disruptive technologies. Already we have seen that the first trillionaire has emerged from one of these companies, and the others are also heading towards that, while the majority of the population, the global population, particularly in the global south, are heading towards more and more below poverty line. And the gaps between very high and low human development index countries, which for decades have been shrinking, at least between the 1990s and the first decade of this century, there has been some trend of shrinking gaps between this group of countries in terms of their human development index, but it has been widening over the past 4 years. This is the most recent data. And as you can see from this graph, you can see that most of the developing countries are in the lower human development index and also in the lower raw material consumption per capita. And most of the countries with high development index are also very high in terms of their per capita raw material consumption, as is shown in this figure. Our possibility is the dotted line on this side, on the vertical side, represents the planetary capacity. So we have to bring our consumption into that limit if we wish to achieve a more sustainable kind of economic system. And this would require to do more by both group of countries. The developing countries, they need to invest and work on enhancing their human development, fulfilling the basic needs of their people, improving their well-being, but in a more sustainable way. If they just continue with the way the other part of the world continues, we will go down to the drain, basically. So they have to take a different kind of development course while focusing on improvement of the well-being of their people by achieving a more sustainable economic transition. And at the same time, the developed countries need to significantly invest in restructuring their existing unsustainable consumption and production infrastructure so that they can come within the limit of the natural provisioning and regulating capacity of our planet. And that is why we are reaching this transformational moment, which would require significant change in our economic system. Why transformational? From systems dynamic perspective, right from the beginning, processing of material, energy, and information has been at the core of every socioeconomic transitions. When we moved from hunter-gatherer to agrarian, we followed a different level of material and energy and information processing. Information by way of captured human skill and innovation, and energy by way of moving from simply relying on human energy, moving towards more the animal energy by domesticating animals, using the additional energy power that exists within the different animals, whether it is the horse, ox, and so on. So the energy has transitioned from the human to animal and then to natural, this non-renewable resources, starting from coal to petroleum and so on. And the human innovation has been there always. Material and energy flows have been dominant determinants of the agricultural and industrial transformations. Essentially, they were the main drivers in terms of the material and energy processing. The innovation that came in this area were the key determinants. And of course, information came at the later stage of industrial transformation. If you look at the third and the fourth industrial revolution, they are more driven by the innovation that happened within the information domain, while material and energy are still critical. So information has emerged as the dominant determinant of the fourth industrial revolution, which is also called the information revolution. But still we have the material and energy component in there. Now the overall discussion around critical minerals, renewable energy, and so on is part of this process of transformation. So current global dynamics is characterized by a confluence of challenges, both resource-related, carbon-related, and digital-related, that are indicated of transformational moment. And that is why we need to have a sustainability transformation in order to make sure that society, human society, continues in harmony with the planet Earth. As concluding thoughts based on what we have described earlier, we can say that the transformational process of the 21st century is driven by fundamental drivers of socio-ecological regimes that have their own dynamics. And these dynamics are not under anybody's control. They have their own dynamics. So we have to be able to understand that dynamics. And human ingenuity has the option of managing this transformation process by understanding these dynamics or be at the mercy of their corrective actions as a result of our failure. We should not think that we can continue with business as usual without any consequences, because the planet Earth has got its own corrective mechanisms. What we see in terms of droughts, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, and so on, are a result of that manifestation. And that is why over the last decade, the rate, frequency, and the strength of natural disasters has increased significantly. When natural disaster comes, no country has the possibility to stop it, especially when it is an irreversible kind of change. So it is important to stand where we are and think seriously about how we can correct our course and be able to move towards a more sustainable development path. So the promotion of transition to an inclusive, resource efficient, and climate resilient economy offers the greatest hope to avert the existential threat faced by humanity. All of the confluence of challenges that we face today are indicating that we are dangerously heading towards an existential threat. So this would require transitioning from the predominantly linear and reductionist mode of thinking to a more holistic thinking that is guided by the systems thinking principles. So our mode of thinking need to fundamentally change. Essentially, need to shift our focus towards more human well-being and ecosystem well-being, within which the profit and to some extent the power dynamics can be addressed. Unless we make that kind of transition, we'll be facing a major challenge, even within the current generation, let alone leaving a better world for the future generation. So these are some of the reading materials that anyone who's interested can look into in terms of getting more information about what has been covered in this episode. And would like to invite you to visit the website of AfroLeap 21 if you wish to have more information about podcasts. You can also find our previous episodes on our YouTube.com channel, which is at AfroLeap 21. And for further communication, you may contact us at info@afroleap21.com. Thank you very much and look forward to see you in the next episode. Thank you.